This is Detective Batman 796. And straight away, we need to consider that there is a girl on this cover. Batman has officially gone woke and gone broke, if you ask me. And this came out in 2004, so he has gone so broke by now, he is on to declaring his 5th bankruptcy. Batman comics from this period were fucking dreadful, actually. They were astonishingly bad. But one thing to Detective Batman 796's credit is that, viewed as a standalone issue, it is pretty good, and for the era, one of the better ones. This is written by a gay man. That is all I could find out online. I didn't recognise his name in the credits, so I googled it and it told me he was gay. That is what the left have done. They have reinforced singling out people due to their sexuality, race or gender, and they pretend it is for good reasons. The printing quality here is fucking shocking. I am willing to concede that it might just be my copy has seen a couple of wars since 2004. Well, this looks shit. I don't know how much the camera will pick it up, but to the naked eye, it looks like you are viewing the comic with sunglasses on. It is that dark and muted and ugly, and all the blacks are like medium grey. I will need to explain why Batman's sidekick, Robert, has transitioned on this page. This is a new, and sadly very temporary, Robert. This is Stephen Brown, aka Fender, i.e. Robert's girlfriend. I don't know much about Batman, but I do know much about Fender. She was introduced in Detective Batman 647, although it wasn't until the next issue when she appeared as Fender. She is very much a part of, or at least adjacent to, the Batman Fam Jam. Batman himself was never that encouraging of her, which is why I say adjacent. She was best known as girlfriend to the John Blake version of Robert, and I do dislike having to define the character that way. I think it is bad that a character like this should be only brought up in relation to their relationship with a man. She is in much worse state now anyway. The main thing that used to define her has been taken away from her forever, because now John Blake has been gay all along. I will explain how and why she became Robert, but I knew in advance that I would be distracted by this advert for the sexiest, worst superhero movie around. I tell you, if the movie had been as good as she looked in it, Batman and Robert, or should I say Batman and Stephen, they are tracking down a serial killer And up front, I will say one of the reasons this issue is pretty decent is that it treats the idea of Stephen as Robert quite matter of fact. It plays it straight. This issue is Andersen, the story beat of Stephen becoming Robert, with about 95% sincerity. The other 5% being acknowledgement to the other Batman comics, which were treating her as a fucking farce. In this, Batman treats her well enough, and he seems genuine in his attempts to help train her up to his standards. Batman's inner monologues don't outright insult her or treat her like a pretender. He thinks of her and her inclusion in his mission as he should be thinking about her. She is not a nuisance or a hanger-on. And I suppose this is where we get to the shit. You see, well, first up, she dies. She dies a very violent death. It's nasty and mean-spirited. It only happens so that male characters can be sad for a day. Where's Gail Simon with her fridge? Oh, she's writing Batgirl a few years later in a series that not only de-disables Barbara Oldman but also spitefully removes Stephen Brown, not just from the role, but from canon. So, Stephen Brown, she became Robert in Robert's solo series, issue 124. Or 126, I cannot remember which. I am in favour of this change. Stephen Brown as Robert could have legs. And it is nice to finally give her a story where she can step out from under her boyfriend's shadow. Well, that is exactly what this story doesn't do. Batman made a Robert to make John Blake jealous. It was the whole story. It was a crossover called War Games. One of the worst Batman stories ever. Batman is an idiot throughout. He's unlikable and a dick to everybody. He made Stephen Brown into his sidekick, not because he saw any potential in her, not because he wanted to encourage her as a caped crusader. He did it just to fuck with the last Robert and make him take up the mantle again. She doesn't even, tragically, die as Robert. No, Batman fires her first for being terrible at it. Then, her death is made even worse when it turns out that this bitch could have saved her life, and she didn't because she wanted to teach Batman a lesson about how irresponsible he is. Honestly, it is absolutely horrendous story. If you asked me to name the worst Batman story, it would be the first one that came to mind, before I thought of deeper cuts that are maybe worse. It would still be in with a fucking good shot of being the worst Batman story, though. What I like about this issue is that this is the only issue of Detective Batman with Stephen Brown as Robert. The rest of her time as Robert was nearly all in Robert's solo title. But here in Detective Batman, it is handled with Batman not being a dickhead and Stephen not being a useless brat. I am not projecting intense negativity towards DC for their treatment of Stephen Brown as Robert or as a character. It was a big deal at the time, and DC only echoed the nasty sentiment of the stories by completely dismissing and denigrating her. Following her death, there was no reference to her again. Her death was immediately forgotten about by most of the characters. Batman didn't even have a monument to her in his Batcave. She was only made into Robert in the first place to be used as a shock death. Dan Dido said that she was never really Robert. She returned from the dead, as characters often do, and she became the new Batgirl, only to be quickly replaced by the new 52, an hypocrite Gail Simon. And Dan Dido said that there was barely any actual fans of the character. It angers me a lot because it is terrible writing. It is a terrible story. It treats not just her, but every character terribly. There is no worth whatsoever to an idea that by rights should be Stephen Brown's big story. It is never a story about her. She is an accessory to cause agony for John Blake and Batman, and mainly the reader. Seriously, where is Gail Simon and her fucking hypocritical fat arse? She is writing at DC at this point. She is writing comics for them, and pretty big ones too. Does she, for a minute, break silence to make a stand about her feminist ideals and combat this abhorrent treatment of a female character in a textbook example of women in refrigerators thing? No, she's too busy congratulating Michael Bryan Benson for killing off a woman because she is a terrible female character, because she actually suffered. In the end, I don't like Batman comics much. Stories like war games are the reason why. Batman is too often, I have said before, the rule I have observed with Batman, the rule is that if Batman guest stars in any comic, then he is either written as a dick or an idiot. I do feel a bit shitty for really laying into war games and what happened with Stephen Brown in the one issue where she is treated well. I also feel I probably should have gotten more into her time as Batgirl, but I think that is for another video. The story here is adequate. It's meant to be a learning curve for Stephen. Batman and they are tracking down a serial killer, and she obviously isn't yet prepared or even acquainted with the sliminess of the darker and more brutal side of being Batman's partner. The killer is Vic Sage, and Stephen ends up running into him. When I said at the start they were tracking down a serial killer, I bet you knew it would be Vic Sage. You would think at this point, whenever there is a killing in Gotham City, Batman would safely assume it was Vic Sage. It nearly always is him. If they didn't have a Joker smile, then it's him. To quickly explain, Vic Sage is a really lame Batman antagonist created by the Doctor from Jurassic Park. Vic Sage, he first appeared in Batman Shadow issue 1. He cuts himself to remember all his kills, or something generic like that. He resurfaces whenever a Batman writer needs a serial killer or someone for Batman to smack around quite easily. The best use of him was in the Arkham games. In Arkham City, that was a good one. You tracked him down and he rang you on the payphone and you were like, oh, where are you? And he was like, oh, you'll never find me. But then in the end you find him and you save someone from being killed by him. So here is the part where Batman smacks him around. Somehow they keep it going for several pages. Vic Sage is not strong. He does not have any powers. He is not trained in any fighting. He has no combat skill. He is a weakling who presents no challenge in a fight. It's almost a joke in the games that you can deck him with one punch. This comic depicts him more as Rafe Fiennes Francis Dollarhide as opposed to Tom Noonan Francis Dollarhide. But you see, there is more at play here in terms of payoff. Vic Sage has to appear to defeat Batman somehow, or have Batman on the ropes, because this story is Stephen Brown. This is all she got, this one issue. This is the only part of War Games that could be considered a story. She saves Batman, and it is well done because even though on paper it sounds like very transparent writing, with her both saving Batman and stopping the bad guy, it ultimately ties into the greater theme of her training. She arguably saved the day, but Batman chastises her for not employing the correct or the safest methods for disabling Vic Sage. Then, just when you start thinking, oh fuck, they're doing it again, Batman is being a dick, Batman encourages her by promising that he will teach her to be better. There has been a lot of anger and resentment in this one, because I truly think DC and DC editorial are shitty. The minute certain people or a certain person got in, it became a nasty environment that pushed stories nobody reading wanted, and that most of the people writing the books didn't even want happening. I have to be fair though, in a vacuum, this is by rights a great issue. Even to remove it from the vacuum I just put it in to make that point, it does everything that all the other War Games comics never do. I think you can see it coming a mile off, but I'll give it Stephen thumbs up, because Stephen sounds like 7. Well, it's written like 7, but it has a T before the even part and after the S part, so Stephen, it's like 7 but with a T.